Hey Cody, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, just one sec, my dog's barking.
Here, it's all good.
Rivers, it's okay, buddy. He just heard your voice. Rivers,
All
Rivers,
good, man. My dog's sitting right next to me too, so he's bound to start barking at some point as well.
chill, bud. Come on. All right, Cody. I know you're a really busy man. First question. We got to get this out of the way. How much do Miles Brennan's hands weigh?
That's a nice combo of LSU football memes there. You know what? His hands are big enough to throw for about 35 touchdowns this year, so I think he's in good shape.
It was so funny to hear that intro to your podcast the other day because it was something that had bothered me all off season. Like, this is getting really creepy with the weight stuff. But
Well, it's been like that since he first got here. He's used to it, but I think we can finally put it to bed. I think he's in a good spot now.
we definitely can. And the first question I was actually really wanting to ask, Cody, you played basketball as a local Baton Rouge athlete, playing at Parkview High and then Nichols State. Were you a creative kid above being an athlete when you were younger?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I was always, I remember in third grade we had a career day report. Um, we had to write a paper and put together a little project on what we wanted to do. And I picked a sports writer mostly because one, I liked writing. I used to read a ton as a kid and read a ton of sports books, a bunch of Matt Christopher books and all that kind of stuff. And so that interested me in that aspect. Also, as my parents, I was like, look, I want to do something in sports. I'm probably not going to be athletic enough to play professionally, which for a third grader was kind of a pessimistic outlook, but I guess it was more realistic. And I didn't think I wanted to go into coaching or teaching. That's what all my parents and my brother ended up doing. And so I wanted to be around sports, and sports writing felt like a good fit. So, yeah, I wrote for the school paper when I was in high school while I was still playing sports, and um, it was always in the back of my mind. That's what I wanted to do. If I wasn't going to do that, I wanted to be maybe an English teacher or English professor. So it was a good fit. Once I realized that I wasn't going to be able to play much basketball in college, I was able to transfer to LSU and start writing almost immediately, and just kind of work on my craft from there. But yeah, I mean, I always loved reading great sports writing, and always had a creative bent. Always enjoyed English class and writing essays and that kind of thing. So it was a good mixture of my interests.
Cody, you've been working with LSU since fall of 2018, and you've seen this rise, this crazy rise out of the ashes of the Les Miles era and the Stone Age offenses and all that. What do you think was Coach Orgeron's biggest obstacle personally and professionally to become a success at LSU?
I think the biggest obstacle was just generating belief, not for himself. I think Coach O, I think there's a lot to learn from failure. It was the thing that I said when he was hired. I think I liked the hire a little bit more than a lot of people. One reason that I really liked it is my brother, who's a football coach. He really liked the hire. He's not a big LSU football fan per se, but he's a football guy, and he just liked what he had seen from Coach O. He liked the philosophy that he had developed in terms of empowering his assistant coaches and focusing on his strengths and adding strong suits around that. I liked the hire initially, and I remember saying early on, I think this doesn't happen a lot in college football because usually once you fail, you're not really going to be able to work your way back up. And Coach O was in such a unique situation. I think you can learn a lot from failing, messing up. And he certainly did at Ole Miss. He learned what he did right, but he learned what he did wrong. He learned how to fix it. So I think he came in with a great philosophy, a great approach, a great plan. I think he just had to convince everyone else to buy in. He had to convince the fans. He had to convince recruits. He had to convince his own players. And it certainly wasn't easy. I think that the Troy loss, we all remember that.
Yeah.
Sunday after the Troy loss, we all kind of thought, that was before I worked at LSU, that I think we were all kind of thinking, this is going bad really quickly. And then literally the next week, they beat Florida and kind of turned it around. And so I think that was the biggest obstacle. He had to convince people that he was the right guy for the job, and he did. And especially, you look at convincing a Joe Burrow to come to LSU, and that persuading Joe that, hey, we believe in you. You can be the guy that can take us to the next level. Same with recruiting guys like Jamar Chase and Terrace Marshall. He had to convince those guys, hey, take a chance on LSU. We haven't had a productive passing game in the past, but we are going to modernize this offense. So, once he had a belief within himself, he just had to get other people to buy into that belief. And that's what he's done. He's done it gradually, but he's done it thoroughly.
That's actually pretty right on the money, Cody. I mean, other than Coach O or Joe Burrow, who has been the most instrumental in that rise that may not be receiving their due by the general public or the mainstream media or sports writers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a super tough question. I mean, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Steve Ensminger.
Absolutely.
I think Coach Ensminger is almost the embodiment of the humility and the selflessness that LSU football has come to embrace and that LSU football has thrived off of. I mean, here's a guy that, tight ends coach for a long time at LSU, and first of all, had the humility look, go find someone better than me, and then Coach O had to convince him, no, like, you're the guy. So he did it in the interim in 2016. He did a good job. Then he was humble enough to step down from that role, back into the tight ends coach, let LSU take a shot on another coordinator. That didn't work out, and then he had the belief in himself to step back up to the offensive coordinator job in 2018, and he had the honesty, the self-actualization to realize when Coach O came to him and said, we've got to fix this, we've got to add a spread element to this, to not only agree with Coach O and to pursue the building of that offense, but to allow a guy, Joe Brady, 30 years old, 29 years old at the time, to come in and give him as much of the offense as he needed to. I've been around a lot of football coaches, and the best ones have big egos. That's why they have gotten where they are. They have big egos. They get people to buy into that. And Steve Ensminger has the ego that's necessary for that job. He has the self-belief necessary, but he also has the humility enough to step aside, know when he needs help, know what his strengths are, play to his strengths. So I think he is as good of an embodiment of what LSU football has become, played at LSU, loves LSU, is willing to sacrifice for LSU, tough, gritty, authentic. I mean, all the things that you think of when you think of LSU football, they apply to Steve Ensminger.
Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree with you anymore. I mean, the fact that he was demoted from that position after waiting so long by Coach O, almost like, doing Aliva's bidding, and then they put in Matt Canada, and then he gets another shot. It's absolutely crazy. And I was going to ask this question a bit later, but since you brought up Ensminger, I'm going to jump right into it. There's a lot of questions from a lot of rivals, especially, saying it was definitely Brady who administered the epic juggernaut LSU offense. And from what I see, it's mostly a marriage of ideas and beliefs and offensive philosophies which created that greatness. But from where you stood, from your full access, who had the biggest hand to play in that offense, Ensminger or Brady?
I kind of think of it this way. Joe Brady kind of brought the software. Like, he installed the software, the upgraded software that LSU needed in its offense. Steve Ensminger has a ton of football knowledge. I think his biggest strength offensively is his instinct. He knows, he called about 70-75% of the plays last year. So he was dialing up. He was tapping into the software that Joe Brady helped install. And so you think of, like, there were just some play calls last year that stand out to me. 3rd and 17 against Texas, to go for it, to, in that whole drive, LSU went for it. It's a time in the past where LSU would have backed off, taken its foot off the gas, tried to run some clock, and Steve went for it. So a couple quarterback draws, Auburn quarterback draw for a touchdown.
Huge
Alabama
play.
quarterback draw. A few play calls. Alabama where they kept doing they did kind of the fake quarterback run, and then Joe threw it to Martinez for a first down in the fourth quarter. Steve just has a great gut for when to call plays, so I think they worked well together. I think, honestly, if you had to pick one to lose from last year, I think Joe Brady was probably the guy that you could most afford to lose, just because he brought everything to the table already that you were missing, and so now you can build on that. You have that foundation that he brought in. Without him, certainly, without that kind of offense, LSU doesn't do what they did last year. But I think now that he's installed it, I don't know that there's much more that he had left to add. Now, would LSU have loved to have kept him? Sure. But I think with Steve's experience, with his intuition, with his instinct, and then you build on that, and you bring in some more experience around him at the passing game coordinator spot. I think that's a recipe that LSU can build around moving forward. I think culturally they keep things the same. They continue to bring in expertise in the passing game, but they're still LSU, and certainly Coach Brady, who I have a lot of respect for, and liked a lot personally while he was here. He's gone on to a dream job for him to coach the NFL, so it kind of worked out for everybody.
Yeah, and did you ever see a moment of peril or doubt or at least uneasiness in that team during that ride? I mean, from an outsider perspective, even a diehard fan, it was like, is this team are they ever going to flinch? Are they ever going to blink even just for a moment? Did you ever see that?
No, it was almost like unsuspenseful. It was almost like boring's not the right word, but it was just, there was such a flat line. It was almost like the only athletic experience I think I could compare it to is like Barry Bonds, when Barry Bonds was in his prime. Like, you just knew
Home run.
Bonds was going to step up to the plate, and you were going to hit it out of the park or get intentionally walked, and there was really nothing anyone could do about it. And you knew he was going to, break the home run record, and what was it, 2001 that he broke the record. Like, it was just inevitable, and that's what last year's LSU team was. They were completely inevitable. The only team that could have beaten them was themselves, and I don't think they could even have beaten themselves, because they were just such a well-oiled machine. And that's the other word that I've used. I've called them a machine before, and that almost demeans them, because it wasn't like they just, they're human, and they're kids, and they're young men, and they're adults who are coaching. But it's also a compliment to them. Like, they put in the work to make themselves that machine. They went through the growing pains in 2018, worked their butts off in the offseason, installed a new offense, and built themselves into a machine, built themselves into a juggernaut that basically all they had to do was show up, implement what they were capable of, and no one could do anything to stop it. It was just kind of the perfect storm of that quarterback that can open up the entire field. He can go through 4 or 5 progressions in a snap, probably mentally the greatest college football quarterback of all time, probably the greatest college football quarterback single season of all time. But I mean, just mentally on a different level than anyone we've seen at that position. Seen for the position players, Thad Moss, probably the smartest tight end that I've ever been around. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, genius at running back. Jamar Chase, extremely smart football player. Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall, list goes on offensive line, on Bishopberry. Just one of the smartest football teams you'll ever see, and then just super talented. All the first-round picks, 5 first-round picks, and there will be more once Jamar goes in the first round, and Terrace has a chance to do the same thing. So it was just a combination of talent, smarts, and culture. I mean, when you mix all those things together, like, it's inevitable. So yeah, I never saw them in peril. The only time I was ever nervous all year was at 17-7 in the national championship game, and the only reason that I even kind of faltered, one, I had a really bad headache, so I think the headache kind of threw me off my game. But 2, just Clemson going with the cover 0 and throwing everybody at them. I thought maybe Clemson was the one team, because we just hadn't seen anybody yet that could do that and get away with it. And then Joe just started going at Jamar one-on-one, and then it was over.
Absolute. Actually, while you're saying machine, the word that came to me was clinical. Just so practiced. And I don't want to drill 2019 into the ground because we've celebrated that team a lot, and they deserve so much. But just one more question about that 2019 team before I ask you some interesting stuff about 2020. What was the craziest, most unheard story from that era?
I'm gonna need a second to think about that. I mean, I remember being in the locker room after the Alabama game, and we all know the headlines that came out from there. I remember sitting there thinking, like, oh, this is, like, special, like, that I get to see this behind-the-scenes moment that no one else gets to see, and then, sure enough, it got out on Instagram somehow. So I don't think that necessarily qualifies. I think probably it's not really unheard, but I think one of the wildest moments for me was coming back from that Alabama game, and the plane lands, and there are just hundreds, if not, well over 1,000, a couple thousand people at the airport waiting to greet the team. It was a dark night. It was foggy. You couldn't see, extremely well, but the feeling was just unbelievable. And, like, Joe's a great example. Joe, super stoic guy, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Just to get him to smile or laugh or to, waver from that kind of flat line that Joe Burrow is was really difficult. But he was like a kid. I mean, he was like a giddy child on Christmas morning when we got back from that Alabama game, seeing all those fans out there. He was smiling. He was running up and down the fence line, giving out high fives. Like, that was a special moment. I think for a lot of reasons. One, to get the Alabama monkey off the back, so to speak, to beat Alabama, to finally kind of put that losing streak to bed. That was great. But it also, I think, was the moment that everyone kind of knew, like, all right, it's a national championship, and it's going to take something drastic for this team to not win a national championship. So I think it was just that special moment where everyone kind of realized the hard work was paying off, that it was going to pay off, that it had paid off, and that this team was special in a way that, every team wins, every year there's a team that wins a national championship. They're special. They're special to that community. They're the best team in the country that year. But I don't know, just that LSU team last year just had a different feeling to it, where it just felt like something bigger, felt like something that brought in so many people. And I think that's why, social media and hype videos and, whatever else you want to say, all the stuff that kind of went viral with LSU last year, it was all good content, and it was all good whatever, it was all good independent of itself. But I think it was all, the reason it blew up, everything blew up the way that it did, was just that it's hard to put in words, that larger, all-encompassing kind of movement that the LSU football team last year made. They just, it was a culmination of so many factors that made them kind of that transcendent team, and it was cool to kind of see it. But I think that night, to me, that night coming back, getting off the plane, and just seeing all those people and the reaction on the players' faces, and that was a special night.
And on August 5th, 2019, during an interview with Jordy and T-Bob, Cody, you predicted the rise of Thad Moss and LSU's evolution at the tight end position. And that's before the season even began. I think that's before fall camp even actually began. What effect do you think that this new wrinkle has had on getting a player like Arik Gilbert to come to LSU, and even, what it's done as a function of our unstoppable offense? Do you think that new facet at tight end has jettisoned the offense?
For sure. I mean, what was great about that is I never saw him drop a ball, ever.
Yeah.
Never saw him drop a ball in practice. He literally didn't drop a ball in the game last year. I've literally never seen a ball hit his hands and hit the ground. So he was super reliable as a target, but he was versatile. He could block, he could run block, he could chip and pass protection. He didn't need the ball in his hands to make an impact. And the best thing about LSU's offense last year was the versatility. line up anybody anywhere. You could power run with Clyde. You could throw the ball to Clyde. You could go deep to Jamar. You could go deep to Preston. You could go deep to Harris. You could play in the middle. You could play on the sidelines. You could do everything. And a versatile tight end is a game changer in that sense. LSU's recruited well at tight end over the years. There was always, this kind of old school offense where it was run the ball and play action off of that. And the most dynamic tight ends don't really make an impact in that way anymore. Most of them are getting out in the slot, or if they are, on the line, they're moving back and forth. They're lining up an H-back. And Thad was just a great example of that. I mean, look, you've seen it with the tight ends they brought in this year, with Gilbert, with Cole Taylor, with some of the guys they're recruiting. Tight ends want to come to LSU now, and I think Iowa has had a lot of production at tight end and put guys in the NFL. There's a couple schools that have had success at tight end, but if I'm a high school recruit right now, I look at Foster, who was drafted, Stephon Sullivan, who didn't even play as much, was the backup tight end. He gets drafted. Thad wouldn't have been hurt. He absolutely would have been drafted. He's probably going to have a good career in the NFL once he gets healthy. If I'm a high school recruit, I'm looking at this offense and the way that LSU's emphasized the tight end, and that's where I want to be. I know I can go there and make an impact. That's where I want to be.
100% agreed. You interviewed Miles, and it was a fantastic interview for your Hey Fightin podcast. What do you see in Miles that may be most misunderstood about Brennan?
I think he's just mature. I think people are looking at him like this green, first-year starter coming in, and he kind of is, I guess, technically, but he's really mature. Like, he's been waiting his time. He's been patient. He's taken every step that you'd like to see him take. So I think there's a maturity there. Now, there's going to be some on-field lessons to learn. The one thing that you always saw with Miles was the way that I've always kind of put it, whether it was in a game or in a scrimmage that I saw, he'd have 10 throws where he looked awesome, and then he'd have one decision that was just like, what were you looking at? Like, how can you make that throw? And especially last year, I started noticing that it was 10 good throws to one bad throw to maybe 15 good throws and one bad throw, and then 20 good throws and one bad. And so you kind of saw the progression developing. I haven't seen him yet this fall, obviously, because they haven't done anything yet in an organized sense. But I feel like that's the one area that he's going to have to develop most once the action is live. But if he can progress there, like mentally, he knows the offense front and back and front, upside down, inside out. He knows the whole thing. He's developing chemistry with his receivers. He's got all the arm talent in the world. He's got more arm talent than Joe. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. Joe is extremely accurate. Joe had a good arm. Joe threw one of the most catchable balls you'd ever see, and his timing was impeccable. With Miles, just in terms of like who can throw it harder, who can throw it farther, who throws a tighter spiral, who can whistle it more, like that's Miles. He's got Jamarcus Russell arm talent.
Wow.
That's the kind of arm talent he's got. So it's the other aspects, but I think people know that. I think they don't know how mature he is, how much he's invested in this mentally, how much he's invested in this emotionally. Like, he loves LSU. I mean, he could have gone at any point and played somewhere else and been fine, but he wanted to be at LSU. So I think those two things, his passion for LSU, and then his maturity, I think those are two things that are going to get him far.
How did practices look last week? I know they were a little truncated. We heard some good stuff across the board. What stuck out to you, and what didn't look so great, and were maybe some areas of concern?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been up there for any of the stuff they're doing. I know they're doing their football school program right now, but with COVID and everything, I've been staying away from the facility unless it's absolutely necessary for me to be there. So I don't really know. I haven't heard a whole lot either. Haven't talked to a whole lot of people. I'm looking forward to, once camp does start, I guess, what the SEC say, August 17th or something like that.
Yeah.
Looking forward to once they start kind of getting up there and watching them in that setting. But I hadn't been up there yet, so I don't really know.
Yeah, what we heard was just, pretty much what you would expect, lining up in formations, and it was just kind of interesting. Maybe just the alignments, I guess they were using, but um, what was most interesting, and it wasn't really any big earth-shattering news, but just the personnel that they were deploying. There's a plethora of amazing freshmen on this team. How have they looked in preparation, fitness, and out there? If have you ever seen any of these guys like Ojulari?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few of them at the facility, walking around. The biggest thing that I could say about that is just from talking to people is how impressed everyone is with this freshman class. Coach O, I think on the record, has said a couple of times it's the best freshman class he's had since he's been at LSU, which that's high praise. Think about some of the freshmen that have come through, made an impact, played right away.
Wow.
There's been some really, really talented groups, but he's really excited about this one. I think what you have with this freshman class is a lot of ready to go guys. I think of the receivers. I think of Coy Moore, who looks great. You mentioned Ojulari, Philip Webb. Those guys ready to step in and make an impact. Jordan Tolles, he looks like a
Yes.
a college senior, not a college freshman. Just a lot of guys who are really, really mature physically, really, really mature mentally, and that's been an emphasis, especially the maturity part. Jack Marucci, is someone I talk to a lot, have a lot of respect for him. He's always emphasized character. He's made it kind of a research point for him, and Coach O really, really leans on Jack Marucci. Jack went to him before the season last year and said this is the highest character team we've ever had. You saw the result of that. And so I think now when they recruit, that's part of the philosophy. When they bring kids in on visits, when they're kind of putting things together, I think they run some of that stuff through Jack and his team and say, look, how does this kid fit in character-wise? How does this kid fit in maturity-wise? And it ends up getting them, whatever the final recruiting evaluations say, LSU's got the 6th best class in the country or the 4th best class in the country, and this many 5 stars. But those recruiting evaluations don't really consider is maturity and emotional development and how a guy's going to fit in a locker room. And I think Coach O, and Jack Marucci, I think they're on the cutting edge with that of realizing we may have the choice between a 5-star and a 4-star, but we kind of see this kid that's a 4-star as a 5-star because of his character, and we kind of see this 5-star prospect as more of a 4-star because he's a little bit more of a wild card. So they consider all that, and I think this class is a really good example of that. This freshman group, and I think that's why you're going to see a lot of them. Maybe they were the 135th best player in the country coming in, but they're going to be on the field right away because they have all the talent, and then they've got something a little extra that's pushed them a little bit further. So you got a bunch of guys in this freshman class that fit that mold.
That's just that just makes me feel really good as an LSU fan. From what you've seen, do you believe this is the best secondary and wide receiving core in the country?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to compare across the country just because I don't pay as close of attention to other places. Derek Stingley Jr. is the best cornerback in the country, and Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in the country, so that's a good start. Nobody else can make that claim. I think Terrace is a top 5 receiver, potentially in the country. I think he's so underrated. I don't know what people are thinking when they underrate him. If you've seen him, you know what he's capable of. I think he's going to be awesome. Lacey McMath is in for a breakout year. I think he can have similar numbers to what Terrace put up last year, and maybe even better if he stays healthy. Eric Gilbert, who we talked about a little bit earlier, he's going to play a lot. He's going to make a lot of plays, so you can kind of include him in that group. Even behind that, like I mentioned, the Coy Moore guy that can play right away. Keyshawn Butte that can play right away. This Trey Palmer, incredibly talented. So I'd put this receiver class up with this receiver core up with any in the country. And then the secondary, I think, is maybe underrated too. But I mentioned Stingley. Cordell Flott's got a little buzz going to him, and it's all deserved. He was great last year. Reminds me of Greedy Williams. Physically, the way that he plays from day one, I thought he looked like Greedy out there. He's much more. It's a different defensive back group. It's a quieter group. It's not the talkative cornerbacks that you've seen in the past, but you've got those two. They're rocks. Who can be that third guy? Is it Ricks? Is it is it one of the guys coming back, Jay Ward or Ray Darius Jones? Are they ready to step up and be that third guy? That'll be an interesting kind of battle to watch and see how it unfolds. And then the safeties, I think, is deepest safety spot in the country. Jacoby Stevens, stud, can move around. Bruce Hampton was great last year when he was called on. Tolles, I mentioned, Kerry Vincent, consider him a safety and nickel. There's no question marks there. I mean, there's really no question marks in that secondary. So, I don't know what the rest of the country has, but I don't think LSU would trade their groups at either of those spots with anybody.
If you could pick just one or two guys that Coach O is maybe considering as the number 18 this year, who do you think it's going to be? Do you have a hunch there?
I mean, my gut has been Jacoby all along. I think somebody that gets overlooked at that spot, and I just overlooked him when I was talking about the safeties because he's been hurt. Todd Harris,
yes,
is a prototypical 18, fourth-year guy, super high character. The example of what you want on the field, off the field. Great player, can play in the nickel, can play in the safety spot. Once he gets fully healthy, I think he's going to have a big year. He's an 18 character-wise. I think Chris Curry is an 18 character-wise. A guy that always in the right place at the right time, stuck it out, persistent, got his chance in the Peach Bowl, made the most of it. Good leader. I think any of those guys would be good fits, and there's probably a few more. I mean, last year Kaleman surprised me just because third-year guy, big time playmaker. You don't necessarily pick that in your head as an 18, but he stepped up as a leader when he was injured, and then when he came back, he was just this massive leader, and so they had to give it to him. Lloyd on the offensive line, that was kind of surprising because he was an offensive lineman. So, those are the guys that stick out to me. But there's a lot of really good leadership on this team. Damone Clark is an incredible leader. I think he's going to have a really good year at linebacker. You've got a lot of guys like that on this team that really high character and maybe not high profile, but just good behind the scenes leaders. So I think there's a lot of good fits. But I mean, if I had to guess, Jacoby would be my guess because he's fourth-year guy, has played a bunch, big time leader. But we'll see. That's up for Coach O and all those guys that are former 18s to decide. But they got a lot of choices.
Just one more question. First, can you speak about recruits?
No, I can't talk about anybody unless they've signed.
That's what I was thinking. We'll move that aside. Last question, Cody. There's so much to ask you. You are an absolute hard drive of LSU information. Are you excited about covering a 10-game All-SEC schedule this season?
Yeah, I am. It's going to be tough. I'm still interested to see how, travel works out, and how press boxes work out, how player access works out. It should be super, super different than it's been in the past. But, some of that can be exciting. Like we've seen with this NBA bubble, it's been exciting to kind of see this new look. And I think college football will be the same. If they can keep players healthy and keep them safe, which LSU's done a really good job of that so far, and being on top of all the protocols and stuff. Yeah, it creates for an awesome opportunity. 10 games in the SEC every week. Pedal to the metal, no weeks off. Big games every week. A lot at stake. 2 extra SEC games, 28 extra SEC games across the board for all the teams. That makes for a lot of good football. And we'll see what it looks like, but I'm super excited. Super excited to see. I think today they're going to announce they haven't already. I've been working the Arnold one, but announce the two other additional opponents in addition to the ones that are already scheduled. So it'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun. Nothing's really ever been done like this before, and nothing may ever be done like this again. Maybe this becomes the norm. I don't know. But it's different, and different's always fun.
Cody, I've taken way too much of your time, my man. I really appreciate you. You've just been way too generous with your candor, with your kindness, your humor. Thank you for humoring me for the last half hour, and I know the fans will enjoy this, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Good talking to you. Appreciate it.
Hey, have a good one, Cody.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Go Tigers.